Hey, Expat Dad here. And if you're listening to this, I'm sure you've heard about the deal or the tentative deal rather, that's been happening in Greenland with the United States and with Denmark and with NATO in general, and how the United States will most probably, because nothing's been written yet, but most probably acquire certain spots of land in Greenland. So some are saying that, well, isn't this any different than what the U.S. already had for military purposes, or whatever deals they were making to develop for, or to dig for resources? And the answer to that is definitely not, because once land becomes American in Greenland, then it's foot in the door. It's psychologically impactful, right? So the United States has its foot in the door in Greenland, where they'll be planting the American flag, and the U.S. government can do what they want with that land. So if you know anything about American history, is that the United States, Americans tend to emigrate or immigrate rather to American land, and they either through being incentivized or through promotion, right? The Americans tend to move out of that land to settle and claim their own land around that. So if we look at Greenland, if you look at how the settlers settled the West, a lot of it was not really controlled by the American government. It was a case of settlers coming in to the West, and then they just went to the west of the U.S., and they just went west to get their own plot of land, and some not just plot of land to settle, but plot of land to prospect for gold, or gold was the big one, right? Or for other resources. So I'd argue that we're going to see something similar in Greenland. So Greenland is going to have plots of American land. It's going to start being settled by most probably by contractors, military families. There'll probably be an incentive to pay those families and to pay those contractors to be there. And as people start getting used to that place, as people start acclimating, then it might change. I mean, we have to understand right now, you might be thinking, well, who the heck wants to live in Greenland? There's a reason why there's only 50,000 people there. And you've got a very good point. But to that, we can say, well, the weather, if it gets a bit warmer because of, the whole climate change, and if some of the plots of land that the United States that Trump picks that will belong to the United States is along the southern part of Greenland, maybe not the southwest, but say the southeast, then that's much more habitable, and a lot of Americans might just decide to live there. You know what I mean? So the thing is that this has been recurrent in American history, where we have more settlers, they expand, either for prospective, for to get gold or resources, in this case rare earth, for themselves and claim it, or just to have their own plot of land, cheap plot of land. Government pays for the land and pays for the house, but they have to live there for 5 years or something. And after that, what starts to happen is that if or when there are more Americans than Danes in Greenland, then it becomes a power play. Because what'll most probably happen in Greenland is you're going to have these parts of American territory with jobs, right? They're going to have jobs, good paying jobs for Greenlanders, who will be encouraged to leave Nuuk and all the fishing that there is there, and the 500 billion or whatever that they get from Denmark, and come to the American side, get paid more money, and build something better for themselves. And once we see this big, we hear this big sucking sound from Nuuk to the American territories, which is what's going to be the next step. Then the United States will have a much stronger claim on Greenland if it wants it at all. So I suspected Greenland would have been divided into two, but I think that some spots of land is enough of a foot in the door to not trigger too much of an anti-American sentiment, that to where it becomes a thorn on America's side, to to where it can be said it's for NATO or for research purposes, or enough to everybody can be kind of happy. And Denmark, while Denmark is going to be a bit of the loser, but who knows? Maybe they might be getting some money out of the deal. We'll see what happens there. But basically, that's how I think it's going to happen. This is what happened in Oregon, right? The Oregon Trail. A lot of settlers moved there. It's what happened in Texas. A lot of Americans moved to Texas, and then because they were distant from Mexico City, they were able to. They just decided to just separate from Mexico, and I suspect that's what's going to slowly but surely be happening in Greenland. So keep your eyes out on that. And the question is for Europe, right? So Europe right now is in a hard spot because they're waking up to their new reality as, ironically, as colonies, not 19th century colonies, of other countries, but of indirect vassal states to the various bigger players, which includes the United States and China. And I'm going to say Russia. I mean, people say that, well, Russia is not really a power. They're struggling with Ukraine. And although that might be true, there's a lot of smaller nations. In fact, Russia's doing it now with Belarus, right? With Belarus is already somewhat of a vassal state to Russia. And the thing is that if a lot of these smaller countries recognize that Europe, Western Europe as it stands, cannot help them, like Georgia, they will, bend the knee to Mother Russia. So we'll keep an eye on what's happening there. But I think that's what's going to be happening. And I suspect what will happen in the future with Europe is that sooner or later, and I'm guessing many Europeans are hoping sooner rather than later, we're going to see a pan-European politician or a general or a Napoleonic figure. So let's go a little bit into the history of Europe. Historically, Europe has always been these regions. I'm not going to say nation states, but regions that have been at each other's throat for various reasons, for land, for resources, for influence. But in Europe's history, there have also been moments where, because of necessity or because of the social trends, of what's been more grand image. And the word was used was nation state. So I'll give you an example that we're all familiar with, Napoleon, right? If we look at France, pre-Napoleon, I mean, there was a French identity, but it was really more, these were lands that belonged to the king and they were within the French realm. But the different regions had viewed themselves differently. And I'm assuming there was some bad blood between the different regions, like Normandy, for example, that region, they historically they fought against the region south of France, and there are some regions, but at the same time, there are regions that are also kind of interconnected between different nation states. Anyway, my point is that I suspect how Napoleon was able to rally the provinces of France, the departments of, well, they're departments now, but the regions of France into a pan-national identity of France, and giving it a common language and a common future and all that stuff, mostly also out of necessity because of their environment. I argue the same the same thing with Bismarck, right? With Germany, right? He united in various ways. He united the principalities within Germany. Same thing in Italy. I think that sooner or later we're going to see a pan-European historical figure that's going to find a way to unite Western Europe or Europe proper. I don't know when that will happen. I cannot say anything about it. I think Europe's going to go through its own process to reach that point, and it's starting now, right? Europe has been spending too much time on vacation, as the president of Finland has put it, from history, that they will have to. They're going to go through a rough patch, as Denmark is experiencing now, where you're in Ukraine, right? You're having these countries that thought that they were sovereign, but they really aren't. They're waking up to that reality, and sooner or later, someone is going to say enough, and the Europeans are going to rally around this person. That's what I suspect is going to happen. This is just hypothetical. I'm curious to what you think. If you think this could possibly happen. So yeah, those are going to be two major changes that we're going to see moving forward. We're going to see a Greenland that bit by bit is going to become more and more part of the United States proper. And we're going to see a Europe that eventually fed up with the dynamic that has caused it to be broken up at the expense of itself, is going to unite under one banner. Anyway, that's all I have. Questions, comments, please leave them below, and I will talk to you later.